Welcome to the second part of the series where the Indian Debating League is going to be breaking down all the motions from Sofia WUDC, at least the end rounds. My name is Krishaang. I'm conducting this. I don't think you can call it a session or whatever. I want to wish you all a very happy new year, and I want to get right to it. So the type of motion that we're going to be covering today specifically has to do with religion and counterfactuals. Um, and this session is going to be a little interesting in the sense that I'm not really going to be making a full-fledged case or proving any impacts. Rather, what the session is more geared towards is explaining at least, maybe this is not the ultimate approach, but at least one generally useful approach that you could have towards these kinds of motions. How do you come up with the counterfactuals? What are the burdens you need to fill, and what is the direction that you need to think in to be able to find persuasive impacts, as opposed to thinking of impacts and then fitting them into the motion somehow. So, what is the motion? Just a sec. Yes. The motion reads as follows. This house prefers a world where all religions prohibited visual depictions of the divine over a world where such depictions were central to all religions. When you see this motion, this automatically has a couple of burdens. So the first and most obvious burden that people would pick up on is that it's a THPAW motion. Therefore, you need to build a counterfactual. For anyone who might not know, a counterfactual is basically a new world where there is something that was different in its development, some narrative, some belief, something that potentially developed in a different way as compared to status quo, which is our current world. But it's a little more than that, actually. This motion, if you pay attention to it, is a counterfactual versus counterfactual motion. So if I just pull up the motion again, it's THPAW, this house prefers a world, where all religions prohibited their visual depictions of the divine over a world where such depictions were central to all religions. So these are two different worlds that are being compared, which means that opposition by default does not have to defend status quo. Rather, in fact, I think that it is maybe not very strategic to focus too much on status quo. So what both teams need to do is they need to basically come up with new worlds from we like to be dramatic in debate and like to say since the beginning of time, but actually since the beginning of at least human society, and since religions have played a major role in human society, we need to come up with two different worlds and we need to compare those worlds. A shortcut that you might be tempted to take, or sometimes in some debates can be useful to take, is to prove that, out of the two worlds that need to be built, one of them has characteristics that are closer to status quo than the other, and therefore you can just lift a lot of details and descriptions about status quo, apply them to that specific world, and get away with doing a lot of legwork and not doing a lot of legwork and analysis. Um, in this specific motion, I don't think that it would be factually very correct to be able to do this because, at least in human society, we have seen both types of religions being quite dominant in different ways. But also, what we've seen in human society is that there has been how do I say this? There's been a kind of cycle, but not really an exactly periodic cycle with which type of religion is more dominant. So it is not necessarily true that visual depictions have been dominant forever and will continue to be dominant. It is also not necessarily true that they have been unpopular forever and they will never be dominant. If I'm trying to describe status quo, I would say that our current society in 2025 reflects a culture with a lot of visual depictions of the divine when it comes to the biggest and most major global religions. There are a couple of, say, counter forces to this. The first is Islam, which is also a very popular religion. And of course, it prohibits idolatry, but also overall in the teaching of Islam and the communication of Islam, visual depictions of the divine are not really focused on at all. Not at all, but at least to the largest of extents. The second kind of opposition to this dominant trend in status quo is um, more animistic religions or more philosophically oriented religions, such as, I don't know, Zen Buddhism to a certain extent, even though there is a certain amount of idolatry. But more than that, when you have things like Taoism and Confucius, I mean, it's not really a religion, but Taoism at the very least being very popular for well over 1 billion people and being a bigger priority to them than their local forest shrine gods and stuff. So, but in the past, if you try to analyze, there have been periods where religions that are currently very, very visual centric, such as Hinduism, have also been composed of more animistic sorts of belief, and the sects within Hinduism that have had more animistic sorts of beliefs have been more dominant for significant periods of time, which is why there are so many contradictions. And this is true for many religions. So what I'm basically trying to say here is that that's what status quo looks like, which is visual based religions are a little bit more popular. But that is not a very a useful description to be able to apply to this debate. And also, even if you don't know the factual truth, I think saying any of these things is quite easy to, quite vulnerable actually to being called out by other teams. So if you try to give any sort of example, let's say you're trying to say that in status quo, visual based religions are more popular, example A, example B. It is quite likely that other teams will be able to come up with counter examples against it. And at least on the basis of examples and intuition that you're able to provide, it wouldn't be very persuasive. And then you would have to depend on analytical rigor, which you would have to do anyway. But here it's even less useful because first you'd have to analytically prove that your assumption is correct for status quo, then apply it to this debate, and then blah, blah, blah. So this shortcut in this specific case at least will end up being a bit of a long cut. My advice in this specific motion would be to try to build new worlds from scratch. Of course, it's not like Minecraft or Lego. Like you don't have to define every single aspect of that world, but what you need to identify are deltas and differences. Which is why I also think that in these kinds of motions, it is not very strategic to just abstractly keep thinking of a counterfactual or only be thinking about, say, harms or benefits that you want to use and then try to apply them to one side. Because especially in a debating format that is that actually incentivizes teams to be able to find flaws and loopholes in your argumentation, to be able to extend analysis beyond what you've already said. I don't think that that would be very useful and would be very vulnerable to symmetricization by your opponent teams or by your closing teams until and unless you have a more complete image of the debate in your mind and you're thinking about both worlds simultaneously. So again, TLDR, my advice is here to think about both of these worlds simultaneously and then try to identify forks in development or forks in impacts. And this is something that we're going to be talking about. The second burden is to prove the likelihood of your framing in the counterfactual. So it is insufficient in this kind of motion to just describe what a world without the dominance of visual focused religions would look like, because you are once again vulnerable to that description and that framing being called inaccurate by other teams, including your own closing teams, which would then mean that no matter how well your impacts are analyzed, your case might be a bit of a non-starter. So any sorts of descriptions that you have, my advice would be to make sure that you link those descriptions back to one of the preliminary burdens and premises that I will talk about, something that is unique to your world about this specific religion, and ensure that it is simple for the adjudicator or any audience member to follow, that if a religion truly works like X, then it is going to lead to Y, and this specific link needs to be fulfilled. So more so than actually trying to find the best harms or benefits, it is way more important to be able to link them to your description and to first be able to prove that your description is the correct description. So now I want to come to the main topic of this session as a whole. Because like I said, we're not really going to be focusing too much on the actual case that ends up getting built. I will at least try my very best to not be coming up with random case ideas and impacts and stuff. My focus more here is to be able to teach you, or if that's a bit too presumptuous, then to at least explain to you one good approach of how to come up with counterfactuals for these motions and how to identify paths to victory on the basis of the difference in the counterfactuals. So how do you actually come up with a counterfactual in this kind of motion? And this also applies for THR motions. This has regrets motions where you're forced to come up with a counterfactual. So in this motion, you should be ideally asking yourself two questions. The first is, what purposes do religion serve to society? What is the social utility of religions? And I want you to not necessarily think about any specific religion, but just the concept of religion in general. And the second is, what are the needs that a religion has to be able to even exist? So I'll just go to the motion once again, really quick. And I'll explain how we can generalize this approach to coming up with counterfactuals to different types of motions as well. So this motion, if we try to generalize it a bit, it basically says THPAW, where X did Y instead of doing Z. All right. So the person that is actually doing this action, or the actor rather, the entity that is committing this action is religion. And whenever you're trying to analyze the impact of this kind of entity on either side of the paradigm, it is necessary, especially if it's a big entity like a religion or a narrative, or even I've seen THPAW motions where there are other big things like emotions, senses. There was a motion recently which said something about this house prefers a world where the primary sense that humans relied on was smell instead of vision or something like that. Whatever is the key driving force behind any action that's undertaken in the motion, I would suggest that it's really useful to identify what it is taking from society and what it is giving to society in general, because these are the two key considerations that will shape the behavior of this thing as a whole. So in this case, the thing is religion. So what is religion getting and what is religion giving back? And whatever it is getting, it's probably something that religion wants. So these are the things that I think are quite important. I also think that it is important to be attempting to answer these questions in a relatively unbiased way. Or when I say unbiased, I don't mean like to your personal biases. I mean, of course, that's true. And that's an important facet of debating. But in this case, I mean that if you think that it is, for example, just randomly, if I say that I look at this motion and I see I'm OG or I see I'm CG, and I think that it might be easier for me to win on charity, for example. So I keep charity as the key consideration of a religion or something like that. I think this is maybe good if you're in a fix and need to come up with a case quick or need to figure out how to weigh that case. But I think if you are trying to analyze the motion deeply and come up with maybe the best case, you should probably be trying to identify multiple different priorities here. So I think that your goal should also be, at least in a tangential way, I mean on a tangential note actually, that your goal should also be to be able to identify metrics that are abstract nouns rather than full sentences and mechanisms. Because if you make your mechanisms or your sentences of analysis hyper specific to specific cases of religion, you will run into the problem of these things maybe not being persuasive to people that don't come from your same cultural background or geographical background or whatever is making this seem important to you might not also be subjectively true for the judge or the other teams, which might be an issue. Which is why this is the main stage where I think that you should try to be as unbiased as possible and try to identify a bunch of different metrics to be able to answer both of these questions. Because the end delta, and for anyone who doesn't know what a delta means, at least when I say it, it means the difference between two sides. So the end delta in this debate is with regards to how these metrics are fulfilled on both sides, whether the process is good, whether the outcomes are good, and if there are negative outcomes, why the good ones are better than the bad ones or whatever. So I think one level of further analysis that you could do, if you're able to do this bit faster, is to also be able to weigh different metrics. So what is a bigger need for a religion as compared to a smaller need of a religion, or what is a bigger function of a religion as compared to a smaller function? So you can basically attribute different weighted priorities onto the different metrics that you will get as answers to these questions. But that is potentially more downstream analysis. And I also don't think that it's very useful to be able to think about it right now, because this is also something that your debate brain can just kind of rationalize. So if you figured out the best possible impact or the strongest impact that you think that you can prove and convince people of in this round, you will also be able to find multiple reasons to be able to weigh those impacts over other impacts. So maybe this shouldn't be your main consideration right now. So the TLDR of this entire bit of how to start to come up with a counterfactual is that any major actor in these kinds of motions, in this case religion, has both a cost and a benefit to society. This debate is not a quote unquote soft motion, as a lot of us end up say, I don't know, putting it into the basket of, or dismissing it as, because I think that's quite a reductive way to look at it. I think this debate is actually more mathematical. You really just need to prove that one side's ROI is bigger than the other side's. So society is giving religion something. On which side does society give less, get more back? So let's try to get into the analysis of both of these questions, about where religions give more, where religions take more. But first, what do they give? What do they take? So, what purposes do religions serve to society? Of course, the list that I've come up with is not exhaustive. It's not close to exhaustive, actually. You'll be able to find many, many more things. But these are at least the most commonly run in debate sources of benefits or harms that I've seen, or at least the general consensus that I've seen of what most people think religion serves to society. So the first is solace and existential purpose. So most people don't know why they are on this earth, or why they even exist, or what the point of anything is, and that can lead to a bunch of bad things, which you can explain. And how religions are, at the very least, able to provide solace to people in their daily actions or whatever. Again, much like every answer that I will be talking about, the extent to which this metric is prioritized but also fulfilled is obviously going to vary on both sides. So you could try to win on this metric. So just to illustrate a difference, for example, one team could try to explain that on our side people feel more day-to-day solace, and they feel like, I don't know, our daily actions themselves are meaningful for some reason, and therefore they're happy in general. The other team could try to prove that you feel maybe more overall existential solace on our side because you're more certain that you're going to heaven or something like that. So you're less worried about the end outcome of your life, or even you're less scared of death and stuff. So you could try to identify different ways in which they're fulfilled, different intensities to which they are fulfilled. But I do think it's an important purpose. The second is charity. What I specifically mean by charity here is the transfer of wealth and resources from lots of people who have those wealth and resources to people who probably don't. So I mean, of course, many people have different versions of charity that they like or dislike, and different extents to which they believe charity is good or bad. So in the most general sense, I think that charity is just the transfer of wealth and resources in pro-social ways, with religion acting as a facilitator of that transfer, either by incentivizing people to do that transfer, or providing the middle ground and providing the logistics, finding the right people to get it, being the bridge, whatever. The third is a moral code. When I talk about a moral code here, I just mean that people hurt each other less because religion exists. Or, and of course, again, there's many ways to define it, and you can go further and further in analysis. You could prove how certain moral codes, I don't know, incentivize innovation, for example, or social justice, or all sorts of things. What you consider to be moral might be different, but the most basic definition here is how religions are able to influence people to act in good pro-social ways and not hurt each other beyond what's necessary, at least. The next benefit of religions is community. That religions give people a reason to come together to be able to, and again, I feel like I'm a tape recorder. Extents can be different, intensities can be different. A community could mean someone to borrow ingredients from. A community could mean having a daily social life, talking to the people in your neighborhood, being up to date on everything that's happening in their families. You could get a safety net out of your community. You could help them. You could have people in your community help you to be able to send your kids to college, or you could have a much looser community, but at least you don't feel you're isolated or whatever, that kind of stuff. So how important community is, to what extent it's fulfilled by the religion, is up for debate. And lastly, and again, non-exhaustively, but still lastly, for the purposes of this session, identity. Religion, you could kind of connect this to existential purpose, but I think that it's a little different in the sense that a religion gives you a calling to belong to. It gives you a name, a tag. It gives you common attributes with other people. It gives you a way to be able to identify people in the wild or in different countries or whatever. So how important this religious identity is to you and what the link is with existential purpose, what the link is with community, and all of that stuff. You could analyze it. So these are the benefits of religions. Um, since both sides have religions, both sides will be trying to get these benefits. You would probably be trying to prove as to why these benefits are greater on your side. The next question that you have to ask yourself in this case prep would be, okay, they're giving us a lot. What is the input they require? What is the cost they require? They take of us. Um, Here, I'm not necessarily talking about harms, because what that would be is that would potentially be a trade-off, right? You would be trying, which would just be basic debate math, that you're trying to accept some harms, trade them off, prove that your benefits are greater. If you can mitigate the harms, get rid of them, great. But in general, that's the end of everything. In this case, I'm not talking about harms necessarily. I am talking more about the bare minimum cost that religion would require to be able to provide these services. So if you're listing harms, the cost itself could be one harm, and there could be a variety of different harms that religions cause. For example, things like, I don't know, violence is often attributed to having religious reasons. In human history, it mostly has had religious reasons, and a variety of other things, oppression, stunted growth, less development, whatever. There's a million different bad things in society that you could say that religion has either been directly responsible for, or at least has allowed for or catalyzed the situation for a harm to have existed. That is, again, more of an impact. I here am more interested in the fixed costs, because I think that at least when you're coming up with a counterfactual, it is way more important to accept what these costs are, and also way more strategic to be able to find costs that your opponent cannot fulfill for their religion to be able to provide the benefits that they need to provide. So, what do religions need? The first thing that they need, in my opinion, is opt-in. They need people to believe in the religion. The second is that they require credibility. They need people to believe in the religion. They need people to truly believe that the religion is correct. The things that it is saying are worth listening to. The people that it is saying are good people, or figures of authority, are worth being treated as figures of authority. The third is resources. Religions require time, they require money, they require attention, all of these things to be able to provide the functions that they're providing. The fourth is intensity of belief. So it's maybe a little different from credibility, which is why I have written it differently, because it is very debatable to what extent religions want to, how intensely a religion wants to be believed in status quo in 2025 is something which is quite up to debate. And even in general, in a vacuum, how intensely a religious organization would want to be believed in is up to debate. Like, I think it is very provable that religions want people to believe in it very, very intensely, and embody it in their everyday lives and all of that stuff, and be basically cogs, or different, I don't know, limbs of the religious machine as a whole. But I think it is also quite provable to say that, like, religions don't want to be very actively believed in. They want to be something that you take for granted. They want to be a bare minimum consideration in your life, so that you can say that you follow that religion. But they don't necessarily want you to become extremists of that religion, because extremists will get them a bad rap and will get them in trouble with the law and all of that kind of stuff. So it is quite debatable how intense religions would want their followers' belief to be. I think it is still useful to think about in this case, because this can lead to a bunch of other impacts, but it can also lead to a bunch of harms. And there is a certain intensity that religions require to be able to provide a bunch of the impacts. Next is competition. Religions probably function, not even probably, like, they do function quite similar to any other entities or any companies that you can think of, at least in the sense that they are made up of people. They're made up of a common abstract belief that people have, and they are predicated on the idea that they can provide the utility that they claim to be providing. So again, here it's still debatable how much competition would a religion want. Like, for an individual religion, competition might provide challenges and make it tougher for it to survive in the short term. but competition might be a good thing because it allows the best religions to survive in the long term. And you can also keep debating about over competition, under competition, and all sorts of things. But what is important here is that there is at least a certain extent of competition for any particular religion that it wants or requires in order to be able to function at peak efficiency in terms of the purposes and the outputs that it's providing. So, okay, now I want to move on from the stuff that we were talking about, because if we have the answer to our foundational questions and we have the answer to um, uh, what direction we need to be thinking in and what metrics we need to be trying to fulfill or not trying to fulfill, now we're trying to look at differences in terms of what is the motion already telling us is different. Here I'll take the opportunity real quick to go back to the main motion slide in just a sec, um, and remind you all of the wording of the motion. So again, the motion says, this house prefers a world where all religions prohibited. I think that's a very strong and important word. Prohibited means banned, prohibited means not allowed, did not tolerate. Visual depictions of the divine over a world where such depictions were central. Yet again, an interesting word. So these are two direct differences that the motion has given us. So I think that once you have come up with these premises and you have come up with the burdens that you're trying to fulfill and eventually what you're trying to prove, it might be very tempting to just try to keep doing more and more forward analysis and try to reach impacts and fulfill these impacts. Like, oh, okay, now I want to fulfill Solace. I want to win on Solace. Let me find ways that I can win on Solace. At this point in your case prep, I think it's useful to take a step back, look at the motion again, try to identify the delta again, and then try to maybe graph that delta into, or at least, if not graph, then at least some sort of visual chart, some sort of diagram that is able to show you that there is a clear difference on both sides. So what is the difference in both stances? Gov's stance, uh, and basically what Gov needs to defend in this round, is an absolute ban on visual depictions. What this prohibition also necessitates, or at least implies, is that there's going to be a certain amount of crackdown on visual depictions whenever they show up. So the way that you can think about this is of various, say, pagan gods that existed when Judaism was coming up as a religion, and often even are described in the Old Testament. Like the god Baal is literally mentioned in the Old Testament as the golden bull or whatever that lots of people in the desert started to worship while Moses was off getting the Ten Commandments. So I think there is a certain amount of crackdown and religious rivalry ties back to competition, if you remember, that this automatically implies. It also ties back to things like violence and other stuff that we were thinking of, but we'll think about this later. This is just a direct implication of the motion, that it's not just that religions don't intrinsically have any visual depictions altogether. It's that even when they exist, there is a crackdown and there's a forceful crackdown. What do they have? So you're probably likely to have non-visual depictions of the divine. So this can be in many ways. So it can be in more animistic ways, or ways that are maybe more connected to the elements or things that you are able to feel, if not necessarily see. The second could be in terms of hymns and prayers, and that's how you really connect to God. So you could have things like the Bhakti movement in India, which lasted for quite a few hundred years, to an extent still does last. If you've heard of ISKCON, that is one of the main proponents of the Bhakti movement still, where the religion is centered around performances. It is centered around different ways to connect to God through singing and listening to that and that kind of stuff. So what is very likely on Gov is that the perception of the divine, and this is just one delta that I'm able to identify here, and I'm just going to take this one specific delta and explain to you how you can use it. When you are thinking of case, ideally you would be trying to identify multiple different deltas and then trying to take them equally forward and see which one works the best, how many you can run together. So the main delta that I've been able to identify here, apart from the crackdown thing, is that the perception of the divine is more likely to be centered on the function that the divine provides as opposed to the form of the divine. So it's not going to be a huge priority for religions to explain to you what God looks like, or what any divine thing looks like, what heaven looks like, what hell looks like. There's not going to be many paintings and stuff, obviously, but there's going to be an assumption that people don't want this, Even when they do want this, and there is someone who tries to fill that need, most religions are going to have this being prohibited. So, what is this in contrast to? This is in contrast to form, which is what God looks like, and the function that God provides to you, that is maybe going to be much more important on Gov, is the things that obviously God is able to do for you. So, of course, you can pray to different gods to achieve different things. Like in Hinduism, as a pagan religion, for example, you have a variety of different gods who have a variety of different social purposes, or at least purposes to you. You have a different god that you pray to for wealth. You have a different goddess that you pray to for knowledge, and a different one that you pray to for success in battle, and different one for fertility, and so on and so forth. This is also quite similar to Greek times and Roman times. But again, you can't directly analogize this because there is still a certain amount of focus in picturizing these gods. So in status quo, you focus to an extent on maybe both form and function. Here, it's the function that becomes much more important as opposed to the form. What happens on op then? On op, these visual depictions are likely to be central but not exclusive, in the sense that there can be non-visual depictions, but they just won't form the core basis of the identity. And here is where I would like to bring up Hinduism again, because in the majority of Hinduism, idolatry, or at least modern Hinduism in 2025, idolatry is permitted and encouraged, but it is tied together with other auxiliary things such as like hymns and prayers and stuff. So you're going to have a specific time when you perform a ritual like an arti or something like that to the god of your choice, but where there is definitely a visual element, but there are other elements as well. So this is the thing about op, which is that in this debate, the center and the main focus has to be the visual depiction, but the other non-visual depictions can also continue to exist. I will explain why this delta is a bit important later. The second thing to note is when it comes to op stance, is that you focus a lot more on the form as compared to the function. And maybe you could try to prove that this is not true, but I think that at the end of the day, it would be strategic, sorry, to take this trade-off. And basically, there is going to be the function that each god provides to you, and the varying differences in function, or rather the divine mechanics of how things happen. So, for example, there are various religions that have explanations for cosmology, that have explanations for why the world works the way it does. There are religions that focus on the elemental nature of things. There are religions that say everything is fueled by, say, a divine word or a thought. And there's religions that don't provide these explanations very well. The example of Norse mythology is quite interesting, because Norse cosmology is not very detailed in the function. It does not give you a lot of, and maybe that's owed to the fact that we only have two sources left, the Poetic and the Prose Edda. But the main thing that's important here is that Norse cosmology just kind of tells you that, okay, there was a big ice world, and there was big fire world, and then there was also a giant, and then some freezing happened, and someone licked the frozen giant, and giant had kids, and kids killed giant, and then out of the three kids, one kid became Odin, and so on and so forth. Like, it's more focused on the story and just trying to get to the point where you're able to have interesting gods doing interesting things, and get skip past the cosmology as much. You cannot really look back to this origin story and have it explain why things like lightning happens or whatever. You'd have to focus on the current gods, and you'd have to focus on, okay, Thor is the lightning god. He has lightning hammer. He's able to ensure lightning happens. But in other religions, you would be able to have some sort of cosmological justifications for this. So again, if you say focus on the function in Gov world, what that could look like is more abstract Buddhist beliefs, where there is a lot of effort that's put into explaining the deep cosmology of the universe, how how all suffering is something that stems from attachment, is something that stems from our urge to be trying to run away from the suffering, and so on and so forth. Even old Hindu books have very detailed descriptions of cosmology, why the wheel of time works the way it does, and all sorts of things on a big level. So the idea is that on one side, you probably focus more on obviously what the gods themselves are doing, on Gov, but also more on how things work, how the mechanics of the universe works, and more abstract theoretical explanations for those kinds of things. And on Op, you might leave those things a little vague. You might leave those things being a little contradictory. You might have multiple goddesses involved trying to take care of the same domain or whatever. Like I think in Roman mythology, Minerva and Bellona, and one more goddess that I'm not remembering right now, whose name I think starts with an R, all kind of govern the same domain of wisdom and warcraft. Maybe sometimes subdomains, but that's it. So it's not very clear on how stuff is happening, but you are able to see what these people look like. You're able to kind of relate them to yourself, or you're able to be an awe or whatever. I'll come to that in a bit. So once you have identified what this delta actually is, then you probably go a bit deeper into analyzing this delta and how it affects things differently. So the first thing that we identified was crackdown, on how this prohibition is likely to lead to some sort of crackdown and necessitates crackdown. So Gov would probably have to explain why there is a necessity for crackdown. Op would have to explain why the avoidance of this kind of crackdown and allowing for these different sorts of approaches to coexist is something that's good. Secondly, on say non-visual depictions, we figured out earlier, and maybe this is an inverse delta of the fact that there are still going to be non-visual depictions that exist on opposition. So opposition would probably have to explain what are the ones that still kind of exist. This would be useful mitigation for opposition in many cases, where opposition would be able to maybe co-opt a certain amount of Gov benefits by saying that they also exist on our side. Gov could potentially use it to symmetricize harms, use the same strategy and say that, oh, you're saying this is bad on Gov, this is also true on yours. I think it's maybe more useful to identify how these things can coexist and what the consequence of that coexistence is. Maybe less violence, maybe less conflict. Maybe Gov can say the lack of coexistence leads to something else. I don't know. But this is the direction you should be thinking on. Third, what is the importance of form? And here is where you're going to be trying to tie this part of the delta that you've identified to the earlier things that we were talking about, which were the costs of religion and the benefits of religion. So we know that on one side, there's going to be a higher focus on form, and on the other side, there's probably going to be a higher focus on function. Now, what you need to analyze is the initial premises that you were able to come up with. How does this specific binary affect these premises and their fulfillment on both sides? So one vague idea that I could say here is, when you're able to see visual depictions of God, it's easier to believe in. It's easier to relate them to yourself or something like that. And maybe that's how you can tie it into solace or identity or something like that. Or maybe you could explain that when you have more spiritual explanations for why things work, and those spiritual explanations are more rigorous and seem to make more sense to you, then it is maybe easier to believe in God, and it is maybe you get more solace on an everyday level because you have less of these nagging questions. So maybe that would tie into existential purpose and identity. You could also talk about credibility, where people are more likely to believe in God or more likely to believe in these mechanics and stuff. It could be it is claimable in this round that if your religion tells you that the world works mechanically a certain way, and then it doesn't work that specific way, and there's some science that comes up and disputes it, then that could affect your belief in that religion and stuff. So in this kind of motion, where you're also trying to analyze over the long term, and analyze the development of society rather than society at any one point, it's useful to see this kind of evolution of these religions on the basis of these things in the binary. So the idea is that when you realize that there is a difference that we've identified, you can now try to figure out how that difference that is coming to you from the motion and your analysis of the motion leads to a differential fulfillment of purposes, or leads to a differential achievement of costs to that are able to then fulfill those purposes and stuff. So I think that's it on form and function. One more thing that I wanted to try to explain here to conclude this session is that at the end of the day, like I said earlier, it's just ROI analysis. Fundamentally, the things that you're trying to think about, that are the harms and the benefits that you're trying to prove, will usually be the purposes of the religion and the costs religion has to society. So whichever side proves that there's a higher ROI will win. The cost, I should have written cost here instead of harms, because I think harms are more linked to the effects. So it's more like cost and effect. It's more like input and output here. And you can basically figure out any kind of difference between the religions, then try to extend it to what the religion wants and needs, and then try to extend it on how well it is able to fulfill the thing that it is supposed to. And of course, there's a lot of scope to be able to tie these things into a bunch of the other purposes as well. And there's a bunch of scope to also be able to tie them into the costs that religion extract from society. And there's also a bunch of harms that you could prove could be greater on one side or the other. Hopefully, I've been able to show you one relatively complete line of reasoning and analysis, at least to the point of identifying a difference. And now, hopefully, we'll be able to identify multiple differences like this and win in religion motions. So, thank you. I will see you in the next session. Bye bye.